This is a screencast of Unit 4, Lesson 8.5 for Advanced Algebra. I'm actually going to film all three examples separately because YouTube only allows me to save up to 20 minutes on their channel, and that's the way I get screencasts to you through YouTube. So I'm going to be doing 1, 2, and 3 in separate screencasts. The reason why I'm using screencasts as opposed to OfficeMix is because it allows me to pull up a graphing website called Desmos.com that I really like. And if you don't have a graphing calculator, it is definitely something you're going to have to use for this unit and also for the test and the final exam. So let's get started in talking about graphing exponentials. We've already spent one lesson on it, and this is our second lesson. The first day, lesson 8, we did by hand. So we picked our x values, we evaluated our function at with those x values, and got our output. So we did the plug and chug part by hand, or let the calculator do our arithmetic. This day we are letting the graphing calculator do the work for us. But much of what we are, the way we start every problem is the exact same. Something else that's different today is we're adding a key features box. So what's the x and y intercept? Where's the asymptote? What's the domain? What's the range? And what's the end behavior? One thing you'll notice is I'm not as good writing on a Word document as I am on the OfficeMix, the PowerPoint for the OfficeMix, so please forgive me. Let me remind you how we start. So we start graphing exponential functions, whether we're going to use a graphing device or not, by identifying h. So I don't see anything in the exponent with the x, so my h is 0. Identifying k, I don't see a plus or minus sign out back with a number attached to it, so k is 0. And then we identify our horizontal asymptote. And to remind you, our horizontal asymptote is always going to be the line. Okay. It's a horizontal line, so it slices the y-axis, and it's going to slice the y-axis at y equals k. So in this case, our horizontal asymptote is y equals 0. So we did all of that in lesson 8. And then the next thing we did was we draw in our horizontal asymptote. So I'm going to let's use red. Let's make it a little bit thicker. All right. Now, y equals 0 right here. So my horizontal asymptote slices the y-axis at the origin, and there we go. So the graph isn't going to go below this line. At this point, we would make our table. I'm going to skip writing the middle column, the part where I'm plugging and chugging. We're more mathematically evaluating for my inputs. I'm going to let Desmos do that for me. To remind you how we set up our table for exponential functions is we always put h in the middle, and k doesn't go with h here. So it's nice on a parabola or a quadratic that k and h form an ordered pair, but not on the exponential. H will have a different output or a different y that goes with it. Then I pick the two x values directly less than h, the two x values directly greater than h. So we were used to doing that yesterday also. We're eliminating some work from yesterday. We're letting Desmos do that work. So I'm going to go to Internet Explorer where I have Desmos pulled up. I cannot use my keyboard because my screen is lying on my keyboard. So I'm going to have to pull up the keypad for Desmos. You can use the Y on your keypad, you can use the numbers on your keypad, you can use the X on your, I should say, keyboard. So, but I can't. You can feel free to do what I'm doing too with Desmos's keypad down here. So our function is y equals -3. I'm going to push this A to this B button. It puts the cursor up in the exponent spot. If you want to do it from your keyboard, the little caret button is above 6. So you would put Shift 6. And then we want X. I'm going to click X here. You can click X on your keyboard. And then I just like arrowing to the right to get out of there. I can hide this keypad, and you'll see here's my function. Okay. Now, to have it do the work and fill out the table for me so I can graph the ordered pairs on the notes, I'm going to go here. I'm going to have it convert my function, my equation, to a table, and here you go. Okay, here are all my output numbers with my -2 to +2 input numbers. Desmos is actually programmed to show you -2 through +2. And when we get to number 3, we're going to have to discuss how to change those because our graph will be moved and we'll need them at the X values changed. So let me go back to the notes and write down what we found out to be our output values. So when the input's -2, my output was -0.1 repeating. When my input's -1, my output is -0.3 repeating. When my input is 0, my output's -1. When my X is 1, my Y is -3. And then when my X is 2, my Y is -9. Let's get these on the graph. I like starting graphing the ordered pairs that have integers. So I'm going to start with 0, -1. So that's on the y-axis at -1. I'm going to go right to 1 down to -3. Start back at the origin, right to 2 down to 9. Now let's get these decimals. So let's do -1, -0.3. I don't know if I'm getting, looks like I'm at more at -0.5. It's okay because I want to make sure that when I do -2, -0.1 repeating, that that's closer to the asymptote than the one directly to the right. So as the ordered pairs are moving off to the left, they're getting closer and closer to the asymptote. Now to draw this, I'm going to hug the bottom of the asymptote. Again, I don't draw so great on the Word document, and then it shoots on down. So that's what my picture, my graph looks like, and it's what we saw on Desmos. Now let's fill out the analytics box. So for the x-intercept, this graph is approaching the x-axis, but it will never reach there because the x-axis is the horizontal asymptote for this function. So there is no x-intercept for this function. The y-intercept we can see right here from the table. It's the ordered pair where x equals 0. Or another way of seeing it, if you look at Desmos, you can hover over where the graph crosses the y-axis and you can see the y-intercept is 0, -1. So either way, the y-intercept is 0, -1. The asymptote, we had written that at the very beginning. It's the line y equals 0. As far as the domain goes, exponential functions, the domain is always all real numbers. This will keep going in the right-hand direction. It will keep shooting off in the left-hand direction. It's the range that has a limitation because this graph does not exist above the asymptote, or the x-axis in this case. So my y's have a limitation. In this particular graph, my y's occur below the asymptote. So my y's are less than, and the asymptote occurs where y equals 0. So for my range, y is less than 0. For my end behavior, let me lift this up a little bit. Oh, I can't see the graph now. So for my end behavior, I'm always going to put positive infinity and negative infinity for the exponential function because it's going off to the right and it's going off to the left. There's no horizontal limitation, there's just vertical limitation. So if I'm looking at this graph on the right hand side, again, when we look at the graph, when we look at x is heading to positive infinity, we're looking at the right portion of the graph, or the right end of the graph. I ask myself, is this shooting up or down? Well, this is shooting down. It's going down. So down is where y heads towards negative infinity. Now, when we're looking at as x travels off to negative infinity, we're going to look at the left-hand side of the graph. So on the left-hand side of the graph, where is this baby headed? Well, it's not headed up or down. It's actually, okay, almost horizontal, and it's hugging the bottom of that asymptote. So that asymptote occurs at y equals 0. So as x heads off in the negative direction, this graph gets closer and closer to 0. Vertically, y being 0, and that asymptote. So as x heads off to negative infinity, y is approaching 0. Every ordered pair, as you move to the left, gets closer and closer to the bottom of the asymptote, okay, but never quite reaches that 0. Okay. This concludes number 1 on Unit 4, Lesson 8.5. If you have any questions, ask your teacher, and we will, I'm sorry, I'm trying to see. Oh, there we go. I found the right button. I'm not used to screencasts. If you have any questions, ask your teacher. Also, go back to JT Learn and look for the other video, the video of me doing numbers 2 and 3. Thank you.